Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Nazir, Parak Test, Chapter 9. We are in the middle of Mishnah Gimel. We're going to start again from the beginning, just to get the flow, that's to keep the flow. So, Hamaitzi Meis Betchila, if a person finds one body, Lishkav Kadarkai, it's a dead body, and it is lying, it is laid out in the normal manner in which a Jewish person is buried. The fact you only found one means that we assume that this is not a burial area and that this person was buried temporarily. And if he's buried temporarily, it can be moved. So you take him the estvusasai, and together with the earth associated with it, the earth that we are taking into account that perhaps some of the body fluids went into. And basically, the point is, in this kind of situation, you can move the body. Matzah shnayim. Let's say you found two bodies. Again, noitlam es tfusasan. You take them and the ground that's associated with them. Matzah shloisha. But once you find three, now we have to be concerned that you've come upon a burial cave. Now, we also mentioned yesterday that a burial cave had a certain specific way that it was constructed or laid out, and with specific amounts. Now, I don't know. Again, yesterday we showed the picture. I don't know whether you could see it, but here in this picture, as you could see, you've got in the middle. Starting from the top. In the middle, you've got the burial cave. The burial cave was typically 4 by 6 amas. On each side of the cave, you had these recesses where the bodies would be put in, would be laid to rest in. You had those recesses on 3 sides of the cave. The 4th side was open to a courtyard, an open area. That open area was 6 by 6 amas, and that would often lead into another burial cave with the same layout. Now, this is important to keep this layout in mind because of what the next part of the Mishna is going to talk about. So matzah shloisha. If let's say you found 3 bodies, so then im yesh bein zeh lo zeh me arba amos vat shmoina. If between the first body and the third body there is a separation of between 4 and 8 amos, which means the first and third bodies are not less than 4 amos apart and not more than 8 amos apart. Those are very specific. Those are very specific measurements. Mm-hmm. It has to be within those measurements, and if that is how you find them, harezu shchunas kavaris. This is considered a cemetery area. This is a cemetery, and it was underground, and it got covered up, and now you've come upon it, and this is considered a area for burial, a cemetery area, because this is how bodies would have been arranged in a burial cave. Okay, finding them 3 bodies within this kind of a distance of each other, that was how the bodies were arranged, and therefore we say you've come upon a burial area, and therefore the point of this is, if it's a shchunas kvaris, if it's a cemetery area, then you can't move them, because that means they were buried there. They were meant to be buried there. If they're meant to be buried there, you're not allowed to move them. Okay, so now a couple of points that have to be brought out. All right, so now here we're saying now the measurements we said like this: if the separation is between 4 and 8, okay. Now since these measurements fit the layout of a burial cave, we assume it's an old forgotten cemetery. Now, as we said before, the dimensions of this burial cave of the cave, not the recesses, the cave is 4 by 6 amas. Okay. Now, even though a burial cave is only 6 amas long, 6 cubits long, right? And we're saying about a space of 8 in between, right? So even though a burial cave is only 6 amos long, amos is a cubit, the first and third bodies could still be 8 amos apart if they were at opposite corners of the cave. Meaning these 3, as we're going to see soon, they don't have to be 3 in an order. Yeah. So if the point is, if the first and third bodies could still be 8 amos apart if they were at opposite corners of the cave. Now, the distance from one corner to the other is actually about 7.3 amos. if you measure the diagonal. Lost the place. But the sages rounded off the number to 8. Keep it simpler. Okay? If the first and third bodies are more than 8 amas apart, they could not have been in a burial cave. If they are less than 4 amas away from each other, we also assume that they are not from a burial cave. Since bodies buried in a regular graves would not be so close together. Instead, we assume that these bodies were all buried in this area temporarily, and they were meant to be moved later to a regular burial area. And therefore, they may be moved. Now, these 3 bodies do not have to be in a row. And I guess if we spoke about before, opposite sides are for sure not in a row. For instance, he might find 2 bodies from the side wall of the cave and one from the back wall of the cave. Because as in the picture, if you remember, you had 3 recesses on each side, and in the back there were 2 recesses. So for instance, he might find 2 bodies from the side wall of the cave and one from the back wall of the cave. As long as they are arranged in such a way that they could fit in the burial cave, they may not be moved. Now again, it's interesting to me that they're talking about they don't have to be in a row, because we just spoke about if they're buried on opposite corners of the cave. So they're for sure not in a row there. But that's the point. The point is these 3 bodies are not 1 through 3 in a row. They could be 2 or whatever. It could be from the side and from the back, and it seemingly can be from opposite sides of the cave itself. Okay. So that's what the Mishnah means. If you went and you found 3, and the space between them is from 4 until 8, you have here a cemetery area, which means you can't move the bodies. But there's another halacha that comes out of that, and that is Baidek Heimenu Ulahalon Esrim Abba. Now, coming from that area that we decided now is a cemetery area, you now have to search from it and out and onwards 20 amas. Now, what that means is like this. So first of all, you found these 3 bodies. The distance between them fits. Okay, we have a cemetery area. Okay, but now we say you have to count from there and further, because once you find one cemetery, you have to be concerned there's another cemetery. Because as we saw in the picture, very often you had a burial cave, you had a courtyard, and then you had another burial cave. So once you find one, it's very possible that there are going to be others. But in which direction, though? The question now: in which direction do you go? So the way they explain it down here is based on how the bodies are arranged. He can figure out where the back wall of the cave would have been. Okay, meaning we know what the basic setup is, and now depending on how the 3 bodies are arranged, you can figure out what's the back wall of the cave, and you measure 20 amas from there. Now, the question is, where did the number 20 amas come from? So they explain here. Actually, the distance across the burial cave, which is 6 amas, right? That's the distance. That's the length. It's a 4 by 6. The distance across the burial cave, that's 6 amas. The courtyard, which was another 6 amas, and the opposite burial cave, which is another 6 amas, would equal at the end 18. 18. It's 6, 6, and 6. You'd have 18, right? And we're saying you got to check 20. Why are you checking 20 for? You should check 18. The answer is, however, since he may be digging diagonally across the cave, a distance of 8 amas instead of 6, the sages require him to search a full 20 amas. Meaning, since there is that number of 8 that can come in, so they say go 20 amas. Now, since he cannot be sure in which direction the other cave lies, he must search for 20 amas in every direction. Meaning you figure out the back, and now 20 amas in each direction. Okay? Now, how do you check? It says you check 20 amas. What do you do? The manner in which he checks is described in Allah 16:4. We're not going to talk about that here, how exactly you check. But you check. Probably doing some kind of digging.
And with a string.
But it says the manner in which he checks is described in Allah's. They don't know exactly what he's doing, maybe, like you say, But what we needed now is the fact that he does his checking. So again, once he figures out that he has a cemetery area here, he figures out where the back of the cave was, and after figuring out there, he goes 20 amas in each direction to see what else he will find. Okay? Now, Matzah Echad B'Seif Esrim Amma. He went 20 amas and he found one body. Baide Kamino Lahalon Esrim Amma. You got to go another 20 from that. Mm-hmm. Now, you can ask a question, but wait a minute. In the beginning of the Mishnah, when you found one, that was enough to take just to move it. You don't have to assume anything based on one. And here we're saying when you find one, that means, and you're checking further, another 20 amas, that means that you're considering that this one is part of the burial area. And so why are you doing that? I thought only one isn't the burial area. But the answer is raglayim l'davar, because the matter has feet, and it's logical to do that. It's true that if you were starting off and you only found this one, then you could move it together with the dirt associated with it, because we assume it's not part of a cemetery. But once we found a cemetery area,
then you have four.
Then you have to go ahead and consider the possibility that even when you check 20 amas later and you found one, you have to be concerned that now you are coming upon another cemetery area and you have to check further. So therefore, that's what the Mishnah means. And this is, again, as mentioned yesterday, the whole reason we're bringing this Mishnah here that has nothing to do with Nazir is because in the previous Mishnah from this, there was another situation where we used the term raglayim l'davar. There was something logical to base on what we said. That was the previous Mishnah. And now this Mishnah also ends up with the same idea, raglayim l'davar, which means to say that that what we are now saying, that what we're saying now to do is logical to do. Even though in some ways there was a precedent to say otherwise, but now this situation calls for assuming otherwise, meaning in our case, although finding one to begin with means it's not a cemetery, but after you've discovered a cemetery area, and then later on you find one, you have to be concerned that that one was part of a cemetery, and you got to go ahead and go further. So it's very interesting because you're only finding one. What happened to the rest of them? Good question. However, once you find one cemetery area, it is, again, logical to say there were more, and even if you only found one body, you have to assume it was part of a cemetery area and search further. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.